So I'd like to go back to Leon. And Leon, could you explain how the call, and talk a little bit more about the call and what's in it? And could you tell us how this compares to Mauritius and what they did, and how we plan on using the call to actually be effective rather than letting the Security Council rule us?
Okay. All right. All right. Well, the call basically says, it's basically informing those who would read it of the illegalities or the fraud that the United States perpetrated in the vote that was taken in 1959. And we're doing this so that they will understand, like in the case of the Chagos Islands in Mauritius, that the party, the administrative party, cheated at the time of the process for decolonization. So we're basically laying out the facts. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to, like Poka had said, we want to bypass the United Nations Security Council, which usually decides on issues of nationhood and things like that. We want to go directly to the countries that are represented in the United Nations General Assembly, because they are much more akin to our situation, because they too went through struggles of their own to become independent. So we have a much more favorable body there. And what we're asking is a technical question. We're asking a procedural question, just like in the Chagos situation, where the question was addressed to the General Assembly, but to the International Court of Justice for an opinion about whether or not the United Nations followed through properly with the decolonization process. So it's a question directed at an action by the United Nations. So this is what we are doing with our situation. It is a question that we will be raising, or the resolution we will be introducing to the United Nations, raises the question as to whether or not the United Nations followed through properly with the procedure that was supposed to be used in the decolonization process of the Hawaiian Islands. And the decolonization process we're referring to is that report on statehood that was professed by the United States to have been a fair election or a fair vote on the direction of self-determination, which direction that the Hawaiian people wanted to go. Only, as Poka mentioned, the Hawaiian people didn't vote in it. Americans voted in it. And so that's really the similarity. We're looking at going to the General Assembly and asking the General Assembly to examine its own actions and see whether or not they comply to their own rules. And we're expecting, of course, for them to uncover in their review of what they did in 1959, we'll expect them to uncover the fact that they did not follow their own procedures. And therefore it will nullify the resolution or the action in which they approved the United States report.
Good. Yeah. So I really want to encourage you to take a copy of the call and read through it, and realize that in there we not only show point by point by point by point by point by point how the statehood vote was a hoax, but then we also show that the whole thing was taken to the United Nations and they were buffaloed. And what was given to them was pure BS. And they accepted it because of the pressure of the United States. Now, what we're asking them now is, let's go back. It's a call for a review of their approval of the statehood vote. And we're saying now, let's go back and take a look at that entire thing, realize that you were buffaloed, realize that here is the proof that shows that you were buffaloed, and then let's re-examine it. So we're not asking the Security Council, where the U.S. and these other nations are so powerful, to come in and support us. What we're saying is, let's get the General Assembly, 3/4 of which is decolonized, formerly colonized nations. let's get those guys to get behind just the question, did we really look at the situation as it was supposed to be?
Let me add something.
Okay, go.
Locally, you have the Democratic Party. And the speaker the head of the Democratic Party at the time was Bill Richardson. You had in 1958, 1959, the head of the Republican Party, Governor Bill Quinn. Bill Richardson, 30 years after statehood, was on a TV show with myself and Mahelani Kamau.
Went.
Now went. And who was a professor? Dan Boylan was the moderator. The issue we brought up at that time was, and we have transcripts of it, 1959, the question on the ballot was supposed to be choices. What direction do you want to go? And so we raised these fundamental questions. And I pointed out to Bill Quinn that he failed in his responsibility as appointed governor by the President of the United States to employ the laws of nations to Hawaii in that question. His response, I never heard of that. Okay, 30 years after. Then, Bill Richardson says, no one talked about that. We didn't know that. We were all in favor of statehood. I said, yeah, all you Americans were. Today we hear a lot of apologies by the church for what they did or did not do. We need to get the Democratic Party, we need to get the Republican Party to come face to face with their history and their failure to present to the people of Hawaii the choices that were supposed to be brought in Hawaii. And we need to make that Hawaii movement as well, so that if we can get the parties and the legislature to say, you know, that's right, at least the question was not correct. And we then send that kind of action to the United Nations to say, see, even here in Hawaii, we have the confession, the admission. Now everybody like to confess, yeah? That's how the United States, hey, we're sorry, we admit, but they don't like give back. The legislature in Hawaii also had made a confession, but don't like give back. But we need to keep pounding them and coming through that angle to say, not only confess, but you should take a resolution and let's send it to the United Nations, saying, and so we have some questions about the very legitimacy of the action taken in 1959. Use the materials we have here. Use the transcript. It's a good thing for Dan Boylan and the TV station, what was that?
PBS.
What?
PBS.
PBS. That they recorded it because those other two mock it already. But it's on video and we have the transcripts, so we got to make use of that and keep banging it on them. Okay, I just wanted to add.
Okay.
So
You had a question.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say those that I'm Melody Aduha. I am the second vice chair of the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus of the Democratic Party. And so we have, or I have anyway, tried to introduce a resolution regarding independence to the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus, but they are so Akaka Inoue based that it's really hard for me to even try to get that resolution considered. I'm trying to get a forum so that we could educate the Hawaiians in the Democratic Party, or at least the Hawaiian Affairs Caucus. Again, Laenui Khan, who is our chair, is reluctant because she is having difficulty trying to accept this concept. But I just wanted to let you know that we are trying in the party.
Yeah,
And
my
desire.
suggestion is skin the cat a different way.
Yeah.
We're not
Skin the
picking on
cat.
Dan Inouye.
Right.
We looking at the historical record and we're just saying, let's be clear with what the
Absolutely. I had a thought, though, also, regarding the points that you were saying that the 1959 election was invalid because the people that voted were not Hawaiian nationals, which should have been the number one, community to vote. And number two, the choice of independent was not part of the ballot. Now, you folks want to go to the United Nations to say that there was this inaccuracy, this wrongdoing, and what have you. Have we, though, polled the people here now to see whether that vote would change? Because if you go that far and yet you don't have that support, then I'm not sure whether we're just, putting a lot of effort into something that will ultimately, I'm assuming a re-vote is the way to do this.
Well,
Depends on-
yes and no.
Yes or no?
Right.
Okay.
The vote itself was illegal.
Yes.
Yes, but if it were to be revoted, who would vote? Hawaiian nationals.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't have Americans. So
Exactly.
it'll come out on the favor of the Hawaiian nationals. So yes, we could have a.
Who is the self?
But the Americans wouldn't be able to vote in it.
Well, that makes
Now
sense.
that
That
the
makes
UN is
sense.
to what happened.
I'm just saying that
Yeah.
perhaps we should start this kind of
Well,
movement.
okay,
Right
but-
now, we're trying to
okay.
collect people for the census, for
Okay, but
example.
I think we're
I'm
getting
going
ahead
to
of
interfere
ourselves.
here. We really need to finish up the things we
Yeah.
came to talk about,
Right.
and I still need to give my talk. So would you
Okay.
stand up for a
Okay.
minute and tell us more about
Okay.
what is really happening?
Okay, I just wanted to clarify one
Okay.
thing, why we are looking at a procedural question at the UN. The United States is really not afraid of all of the things that we throw at them. All of the facts and the information and the history that we give them and all that. They say, oh yeah, okay, well, we'll apologize for that. But they haven't, it hasn't moved them to the point where they say, well, we have to make it right. And why is that? It's because they're comfortable, or they're secure in the fact that we can't really get at them. Why? Okay, there's two avenues that you can approach this. One is the legal avenue, right, which we hold all the cards. We have all the evidence and all the proof that something illegal happened here. But the other part is the political question. And that is the thing that determined the political question is the vote in 1959. They're resting their entire case on the fact that the people apparently gave their consent to join the United States, in spite of the fact that we can now show that there were all of these irregularities and illegalities that happened. They're saying, but they gave us their consent. They agreed to be part of us. And that's what they're basing the whole thing on. So if we can remove that one pillar that they have, which is the consent of the people, we can show the people did not give their consent, then they have nothing to stand on, and the legal questions become pertinent. They cannot dodge that. So this is why we're going after this. And the best way to remove that, to remove the United Nations approval of the political question. That they said, what the United Nations basically did when they removed Hawaii from the list of non-self-governing territories is they said, we accept the United States report that the people had consented to become part of the United States, case closed. And so we're reopening the case and saying we did not consent. Now what?
The one last point, whenever you have fraud, there can never be consent.
Yeah,
And that's what we're saying, there was fraud.
yeah.
Okay, Leon, would you also, though, give us an idea, without naming nations that you've talked with, can you tell us in general how many nations you've been reaching and what the progress is, and tell us about their growing support and what you're feeling, and why you think that we're actually going to be able to get this in front of the United Nations
Okay.
by the beginning of the year?
Okay, again, talking with these different countries, it's non-specific. That is, they're not about to say, yes, we fully support you. Some of the ambassadors will say that, but they, at the country, they're not speaking on behalf of a decision made in that country. There are quite a few countries that I've talked to, and in general, Pacific Island nations, the ones that started the ball rolling to get French Polynesia re-enlisted in 2013 onto the list of non-self-governing territories. They got the ball rolling, and then the Africans and the South Americans and all these other countries that became independent in the last few years. In fact, I was at the vote at the UN at the time in 2013, when they were considering reinscription of French Polynesia to the list of non-self-governing territories. And I calculated about 180 countries supported the reenlistment. Out of 193, about 180 actually expressed their support of that resolution. So French Polynesia was reinscribed to the list. I expect that we're going to get the same kind of support because, again, we're asking a technical question or a procedural question. It's not going to hurt anybody to vote to say, yes, let's examine a possible mistake that the United Nations made.